Everyone's talking about Palantir, the new AI warfare technology that Trump is planning to deploy against American citizens. But not enough people know about JD Vance's long history with Palantir's founder, Peter Thiel, who all but placed JD Vance in the White House. In case that wasn't the end of the world as we know it, Ukraine decided to launch a massive attack against Russia right before peace talks resumed, and trans people are still riding the gay rights movement all the way to your kids' classrooms. All that coming up today on Candace. Welcome back, guys. Last week, Candace put me on to JD Vance's name changing, and I have not been able to stop thinking about it ever since. Because I knew that JD Vance had some sketchy history and some dark forces behind his political rise, but I didn't know how much I didn't know. So let's start today by diving into the history of our smooth-talking vice president from the most humble of beginnings. Because if you didn't know, JD Vance was not born JD, and not born Vance. In fact, he's changed his first, middle, and last names more than once. He was born James Donald Bowman in Ohio in 1984. Following his mother's divorce from his father, his name was changed to James David Hamill. Donald becoming David allowed him to keep his nickname as JD, and his last name became Hamill after his mother's third husband's name. After his mother divorced again, he changed his last name to Vance. By then, he was serving as a U.S. Marine. Worth noting, though, that although he rightly called out Tim Walz for stolen valor during the presidential campaign, Vance didn't exactly serve in combat either. He was in the press corps and served as a military journalist. I don't really know what that means, but I know it means that he didn't see combat. And that's fine. It's just worth noting, I thought. So it's also worth noting that in his book, Hillbilly Elegy, he claimed he changed his name on his wedding day in 2014. But his legal name change took place in April of 2013, just before he graduated from Yale. If you don't know, Yale has a long and storied reputation as a grooming and recruiting ground for America's power elite. The intelligence agencies recruit from Yale, and many presidents, politicians, and senior executives grace its halls. JD Vance, as far as we know, was not in Skull and Bones, but I want to remind us all about Skull and Bones real quick while we're here. Skull and Bones is the quintessential secret society. All sorts of wild stories and rumors surround their induction rituals, mostly involving a coffin and somewhat homosexual group acts that are hard to classify as anything other than a shared blackmail ritual. Skull and Bones is most notable, though, for the sheer quantity of powerful historical figures that have come through its roster. In many ways, it is the quintessential secret society, and it is housed in Yale. Directors and founders of the world's largest banking institutions, such as Brown Brothers Harriman, Standard Oil, and Morgan Stanley. The entire Bush dynasty from Prescott down to George II, along with a couple of brothers along the way, and H.W.'s father-in-law and namesake, George Herbert Walker Jr. Several of the Bundy family who surrounded JFK before his death were members. Both presidential candidates in the 2000 presidential elections, George Bush and John Kerry, were both members of Skull and Bones, just a couple years apart, likely meaning that they were brothers under the skin, as it is referred to by some Bones members. The founder of Blackstone Group, Stephen Schwarzman, was also from that same class, and U.S. Treasury Secretary and human turnip, Steve Mnuchin, were also members. This is just a tiny handful of the hundreds of people who came through Skull and Bones and went on to rule huge portions of the world. Ever since Bush versus Kerry in 2000, I personally wondered whether they truly make membership public still. Because if I were them, I'd be keeping that stuff secret. Because ass like me will be out here on the internet ringing the alarm that secret societies control the world in 2025, which obviously they do not. No way. And so to clarify, Vance was not in Skull and Bones or any other secret society that we know of. But he was groomed for power by none other than Peter Thiel. And we'll get into that in a minute. But first, we've got to talk about his ancestry. And I'm not referring to an early life check. I'm referring to the claims that JD himself has loudly made about his Scotch-Irish heritage. Because you see, Ireland was very excited to claim the vice president of the United States as their own, and they launched a genealogical investigation to try to draw a conclusive link between Vance and his claimed Irish heritage. And they were surprised to find that they could not. Not only could they not prove his heritage, they said that they found, quote, no evidence linking the US vice president to Ireland. So that's a little awkward, seeing as how in his own book, JD said, quote, to understand me, you must understand that I am a Scots-Irish hillbilly at heart. Listen, it's okay to be a hillbilly, JD, but now you've made it weird. You see, Yale was classically a WASP school, meaning white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, basically synonymous with the old boys club of American elites. And to this day, it still is obviously very representative of the American elite. But JD is a man of the people. He's one of the poors, just like you and me. And the plot gets even thicker when you learn about Vance's benefactor and backer all the way from Yale straight to the White House. Peter Thiel, the founder of Palantir and one of the most powerful men in America, seems to have more or less placed him there almost single-handedly. Derek Bros reported this February that Vance was in attendance at David Sachs's June 2024 fundraiser for Trump. And real quick, Sachs and Thiel go way back to PayPal, where David Sachs was the chief operating officer, but these days Sachs is a billionaire venture capitalist with investments in Palantir, Facebook, SpaceX, Airbnb, and Uber, just to name a few. He was also just named AI and crypto czar by Donald Trump. And that's not to say he's evil, just to say that he's not like you or me, and that he runs with a certain type of crowd and his interests are aligned with that same crowd. So, Vance attended this Sachs fundraiser dinner, and according to two people with knowledge of the exchange during the event, Trump informally polled the room to ask who he should pick for vice president. David Sachs, Chamath Palihapitiya, and others all told Trump that he should choose Vance. So the tech billionaires wanted Vance. I don't know if Thiel was at that party, but whether he was or not, all his friends were. But Vance owes much more than that to Thiel and his circle of friends around him. He claims that he was first inspired to work in big tech after hearing a speech by Peter Thiel at Yale Law School in 2011. In 2016, he became a junior investor at Mithril Capital, which is backed by Peter Thiel. He then jumped on to Thiel's personal recommendation to biotech firm Circuit Therapeutics. And in 2019, he founded his own venture firm, Naria Capital, with financial backing from, you guessed it, Peter Thiel. Then, when Vance decided to enter politics, Thiel gave him $15 million to his campaign, which is no small sum for a Senate race. And when that still was not enough, Peter Thiel personally brokered a meeting with Trump and secured a Trump endorsement for Vance, which pushed him ahead of his opposition in the race. He was elected to the Senate in 2023, and just 2 years later was headed to the White House, once again with the funding and support of Peter Thiel. Plus, along the way, he became a New York Times best-selling author on his very first try, and that book was picked up by Netflix themselves and turned into a giant blockbuster hit with A-list actors. Even though it earned the rare distinction of a leading actor being nominated for a performance award by critics and an award for how terrible a performance was by the audience for the exact same role, when you dig into the question of who wrote this book, it's not exactly clear. None of his editors or anyone involved with the book seems super eager to talk about it, and friends from law school seem not to have had any sense that JD was such an authorial genius. He's well-spoken, but not particularly poetic. And as someone who spent COVID writing novels in my free time, I can tell you that it is not easy to string together a storyline, let alone a good one. Furthermore, it's worth considering who he was presented to us as at the time he was presented. Trump's rise changed America, and it was clear since 2016 that Trump's voter base, which is middle-class America, the regular men and women of this country, particularly of the rural parts of this country, would be deciding elections in coming cycles. And so who do the tech billionaires offer up? They offer up a Midwest hillbilly who came from nothing to achieve the American dream and then some. It's all just awfully convenient. And whether or not there is some grand evil conspiracy behind his rise, we can say for certain that he was endorsed. He was endorsed first and foremost by Peter Thiel, ever since day one, all the way to the White House. He was endorsed by venture capital in Silicon Valley. He was endorsed by mainstream publishing and Netflix. And ultimately, he was endorsed by the Republican Party. All told, that is probably the strongest logic to not like him that there is, at least in my book. And just to clarify, I like JD Vance, or at least I like what he says. I like how he presents himself. He's sharp, he's funny, he's got a great balance of humility and witty clapbacks. He's articulate. He's the best vice president I can remember in my short lifetime. But it is awfully convenient for Peter Thiel that he gets his boy into office, and then within just a few months, Palantir announces a new mega program with the Trump government. And not just any program, but Palantir's specialty, a digital mass surveillance system to target you and your family and all the rest of us. The Economic Times reported that, quote, Palantir isn't just improving old databases, it's building what some experts are calling the most expansive civilian surveillance infrastructure in U.S. history. Instead of scattered files and spreadsheets, the platform will use real-time data integration and artificial intelligence to profile behavior, detect fraud, and identify individuals or patterns deemed risky by the system. At the core of the project is Palantir's Gotham software. Already used by defense and intelligence agencies, Gotham will now be used on the domestic front. It doesn't just track information, it makes judgments. It could influence everything from how benefits are distributed to who gets flagged for closer scrutiny by law enforcement or immigration officers. So, good. They're deploying military surveillance AI to watch our every move and decide who the government should bug. And by bug, I mean investigate, harass, arrest, and probably more. And while the Economic Times reported that they would be deploying a technology called Gotham, Raw Story reported about a different product called Foundry. This article reads, the push has put a key Palantir product called Foundry into at least 4 federal agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security and the Health and Human Services Department, the newspaper reported. Widely adopting Foundry, which organizes and analyzes data, paves the way for Mr. Trump to easily merge information from different agencies, the government officials said. Creating detailed portraits of Americans based on government data is not just a pipe dream. The company has received also new contracts from the Pentagon and is speaking to the Social Security Administration and the Internal Revenue Service about buying its technology, according to 6 government officials and knowledgeable Palantir employees. And Democratic lawmakers have warned that Trump could use the personal information to target immigrants and punish his critics. And that is exactly the wrong narrative to push, guys. Bad, Raw Story. Bad. This is clearly a leftist argument that they are making. They could use this to target immigrants. No, they could and will use this to target anyone and everyone. This won't just get used on critics of the Trump administration. This will get used on critics of every future American government until the end of America, because that's how government works. Once you give them a power, they never give it back. And we are entering into territory from which there is no return. And inflaming leftist talking points are both unnecessary and not the move. This is not a partisan issue. In fact, this is a deeply anti-American issue. And I'm sure I don't need to explain to a conservative why having AI watching you at all times and doling out social credit scores is a bad thing. Because when you look into these 2 Palantir projects, Foundry and Gotham, Foundry is for corporations to surveil data and trends, while Gotham is for law enforcement and military intelligence to surveil the battlefield. When you combine the thirst for power and information of corporations with intelligence agencies in combat zones, what kind of surveillance system do you think you're gonna get? Listen, I am sure that Peter is a perfectly nice guy, despite his opinion that our tax dollars being used to bomb children in Gaza is really none of our business and we should defer to Israel. But even if Peter Thiel creates this system with the noblest of intentions, who's the next guy that's going to be in charge of it? And then the next. I mean, it's a good thing that there's no corrupt people in the US government who might have access to all of your personal medical, financial, social, digital, and movement data, because if there were any corrupt people in the government, they might be able to do some really bad stuff with all that. Like, it's a good thing that Larry Ellison isn't in the government, or at least not since he retired from the CIA way back in the day before he founded Oracle, because he said some pretty effed up things about privacy and digital surveillance over the years, such as, quote, citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting. You know, I'll just let him talk because he doesn't make it sound any better.
Your body cams will be transmitting that. The police will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording, watching and recording everything that's going on. Citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that's going on. We actually take the video that the police officer is, by the way, and the camera's always on. You don't turn it on and off. And by the way, the way you turn it on, you can't turn it on. I'm going to the bathroom. Oracle, I need 2 minutes to take a bathroom break, and we'll turn it off. The truth is, we don't really turn it off. What we do is we record it so no one can see it, but no one can get into that recording without a court order.
Oh, that's good to know, Larry. You might notice that Larry is literally on stage at a giant conference. He's just saying this out loud to the world because he doesn't even realize how 1984 this is. Larry Ellison hovers somewhere on the list of the top 10 richest people in the world most of the time. And he's so out of touch that he does not realize how out of touch he is. When asked about illegal NSA surveillance programs, he said, quote, the great thing is that we live in a democracy. If we don't like what NSA is doing, we can just get rid of the government and put in a different government. No, Larry, we are not billionaires. We do not have the luxury that you and your boys, Peter Thiel and pals, have, where we can just install vice presidents and the like. We live in a republic, not a democracy. And I think we all know that the republic was replaced some time ago with an oligarchy, which is teetering dangerously close to just a straight up kleptocracy. Larry has been making out of touch public statements like this for years. Here is a clip from CBS Morning Show all the way back in 2013.
This whole issue of privacy is utterly fascinating to me. Who's ever heard of this information being misused by the government? In what way?
Well, let me just hear you clearly. You're saying whatever the NSA is doing is okay with me.
It's great. It's great. It's essential. By the way, President Obama thinks it's essential. It's essential if we want to minimize the kind of strikes that we just had in Boston. It's absolutely essential.
But what point would it be alarming for you in terms of government surveillance? At what point would your red line be crossed?
If the government used it to do political targeting, if the Democrats used it to go after Republicans, if the Republicans used it to go after Democrats. In other words, if it became we stopped looking for terrorists and we started looking for people with on the other side of the aisle.
Right, Larry. Who has ever heard of the government misusing this type of data? I don't know. How about that one time when the federal government mandated an experimental medical procedure with no concern for HIPAA or medical privacy or autonomy, no informed consent, and no accountability for your oligarch buddies when they made off with billions of dollars and we made off with a long list of strange side effects and a totally mysterious spike in all-cause mortality? And where he would draw the line on surveillance? If we stopped looking for terrorists and started looking for people on the other side of the aisle? Oh yeah, like if you started looking for people on college campuses that criticized a foreign government, not even our own corrupt government, a foreign government. Yeah, Larry, I'm sure that our government would never use these powers for political or other immoral motivations. Let's just ask the Tea Party or the Canadian truckers about it. Did I mention that this guy was CIA before he founded Oracle? Yeah, he worked on a classified program called Oracle, and then one day he shut it down, quit the CIA, and founded Oracle, the public corporation. Totally unrelated. That corporation is already databasing just about everything you do online. That's what they do and what they sell. And oh yeah, he's back to the government thing. Because one of the first things that Trump announced upon getting into office was his new Stargate project. Sounds really cool. It's Trump's plan to invest $500 billion in AI infrastructure by building out a vast network of supercomputer data centers. And from what I can tell, this government project actually sounds more like a socialized private company where our government funds a private venture that will have immense power over our lives. And in this case, that quasi-government project will be headed by SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle. Let's not get into the accusations against Sam Altman by his sister right now, or the cover-up and erasure of those accusations by his own AI platform, because that's a whole can of worms. Because just as Trump and pals are proposing and parading around all these new AI digital surveillance programs, they are also working hard to pass regulation that will lock us all into this dystopia. And here we arrive at Trump's big, beautiful bill, which is inching closer and closer to his desk and becoming law. In it is contained a section that bans states from passing any laws that would regulate AI for a period of 10 years. And with the rate at which AI is progressing, that might as well be an entire lifetime. Just down here at the bottom of the page, guys, it says, quote, "In general, except as provided in paragraph 2, no state or political subdivision thereof may enforce during the 10-year period beginning on the date of the enactment of this act any law or regulation of that state or a political subdivision thereof limiting, restricting, or otherwise regulating artificial intelligence models, artificial intelligence systems, or automated decision systems entered into interstate commerce." How weird. How convenient. We've got this great big plan to run off with this new unprecedented technology. And just in case any of you pesky freedom-loving states gets any wise ideas about passing any laws or regulations to protect your citizens from it, you can't. If Larry and Peter and their technocrat buddies want to watch and record your every move, they're going to do it. You're going to let them do it. And by golly, you're going to like it. But it's important to consider the other side of the argument too. It's not as simple as just saying, ew, gross, surveillance. Everything associated with surveillance is just icky, right? We do need to understand why these ideas are so seductive to Trump and to the American people, and why they are quite likely to be enacted whether we like it or not. The world is a complex and dangerous place. America is not the only force in it. And AI is every bit as dangerous and disruptive as nuclear bombs ever were. And we do want our country to be at the forefront of those innovations, lest a truly evil country get ahead and figure out Lord knows what. A similar argument can be made for surveillance. If these guys have their way, then yes, there will probably be far less crime. Give it 5 years and they'll be floating the idea that we should outlaw humans driving cars. Because robots never ever crash anymore, and all car accidents are caused by us, human error. 1984 will be sold to us with promises of safety and comfort, because that's what it will deliver. The world is incredibly safe when you have no freedom and no risk, and everything around you is a simple, boring, controlled existence. Comfort and security is how just about everything you buy today is marketed to you. The American dream has been perverted by profits to no longer mean hard work and the freedom to forge your own path, and now it equates to a big TV and holidays and weekends off work. My point is it worth it? What would you trade for your freedom? Is safety and comfort worth the price? Because there is no end to the freedom and comfort that these men will sell you. But who knows? Maybe Larry Ellison is right. After all, I'll let him say it.
Great thing is we live in a democracy. If we don't like what NSA is doing, we can just get rid of the government and put in a different government.
It's an interesting idea, Larry. But anyways, if you don't like what the NSA is doing, then you're going to really hate what the CIA is up to in Ukraine. And we'll get to that in just a moment, right after a quick break. I want to take a moment to tell you about American financing. We're all feeling it. Inflation is eating away at everything: gas, groceries, home repairs. And if you're a homeowner, you've probably thought, should I call American Financing to refinance and pay off this credit card debt? Then you second guess yourself because of that low mortgage rate you currently have. Listen, that low rate, it's not saving you if you're drowning in credit card interest at 25% or more. That's the math that no one wants to face, but it's costing you thousands. So here's the truth. If you're only making minimum payments, that debt will follow you for years. That's why people are calling American Financing, because they're saving customers an average of $800 a month by using their equity to finally break free from credit card debt. You owe it to your family to see what's possible. No upfront fees, no pressure. It costs you nothing to find out what you could save every month. And if you start today, you may be able to delay 2 mortgage payments. Call American Financing today, 800-795-1210. That's 800-795-1210. Or visit americanfinancing.net/Owens. And now I want to tell you about PureTalk. What if I told you that you could cut your cell phone bill in half and support a U.S. company who shares your values? Values like supporting our veterans and creating American jobs. What if I told you that you don't have to sacrifice coverage because you'll be on America's most dependable 5G network? I'm talking about the only wireless company that Candace endorses, PureTalk, a wireless company that is veteran-led and invests in a U.S. customer service team so that you have the best support possible. If you're with Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile, join the hundreds of thousands who have successfully cut their cell phone bill in half. That's right. The average family saves over $1,000 a year when they switch to PureTalk. Switch in as little as 10 minutes when you go to puretalk.com/Owens. With plans starting at just $25 a month, what are you waiting for? Go to puretalk.com/Owens and make the switch to PureTalk. Wireless by Americans for Americans. Welcome back, guys. There's a lot going on across the pond. Ukraine just launched a massive attack on Russia over the weekend, damaging and destroying up to 1/3 of Russia's strategic nuclear bomber fleet. The mainstream media has been cooing ever since about how brilliant and audacious and inspired and heroic the attack was. Clearly, they got their marching orders, and clearly we are supposed to still be supporting this proxy war with the world's second largest nuclear power. It's completely insane. I mean, imagine if a nation targeted our nuclear capabilities. What do you think America would do? And I'm just going to say it. Lindsey Graham should be investigated for treason. He should be investigated for treason because he just got back from a trip to Ukraine and talked with Volodymyr Zelensky about his new sanctions bill. And I can't help but wonder if Graham knew what Zelensky was up to. Just speculation. Plus, most of the mainstream media coverage that I'm seeing isn't even mentioning that these planes that were damaged and destroyed were part of Russia's nuclear capability. They choose instead to paint them as the planes that are dropping bombs on Ukrainian cities every other day. Two things can be true at once, and yet the skew of reporting clearly demonstrates an agenda, not to paint this as a dangerous escalation in the war, but instead as a heroic strike from the underdog. The narrative is also sharply slanted to emphasize over and over and over that Zelensky didn't even tell the U.S. what he was up to. The U.S. didn't even know. Trust me, bro, we had nothing to do with it. Not the U.S. targeting Russia's nuclear capability at all. For some reason, I doubt Putin is buying that charade either. If the CIA is not carefully monitoring what the corrupt government of Ukraine is doing in this conflict at all times, they're not doing a very good job at their primary objective. And I, for one, have a very hard time believing that the deep state didn't know of this attack in advance. To make things more interesting, you might be asking, why were Russia's nuclear-capable bombers just sitting out on the tarmac like that? Seems a little weird. Well, they were out on the tarmac because of a treaty that Russia signed with the US, the latest one in a series of treaties called START, which is all about inspecting each other's nuclear weapon capabilities to make sure that no one's getting any funny ideas. This is straight off of Wikipedia. You can read more into it if you want. On 1st of June 2025, Ukraine claimed to have destroyed more than a dozen nuclear strategic bombers, including 2 Tu-160s, at airfields deep inside Russia with swarms of small drones. The bombers were still parked not in nuclear strike protective bunkers, but in open air, according to obligations under the new START treaty with the US. What a convenient coincidence. You see, this is what this proxy war is all about. Cripple Russia, weaken her at the expense of thousands of Ukrainian lives, and maneuver into a position in which Russia can finally be taken down and into the Western fold. I, for one, get the sense that Putin and many Russians would sooner die. And Russia, need I remind us all, has enough nukes to end the human race. This is not a fight we should be fighting, and the American people clearly voted as such. Trump was issued a clear mandate by the American people to stop funding this war and to push for de-escalation and peace. And with peace talks scheduled to resume right now, I can't help but imagine the calculus has changed on the ground for everyone involved. But most importantly, the mainstream media, as always, continues to paint this war as one of Russian aggression. They never want to talk about how our CIA overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014 in the Maidan Revolution. They never want to talk about Russia's perspective, which is totally understandable, that they don't want NATO and Western nuclear weapons and military forces stationed right on their border, a particularly vulnerable section of their border, no less. If we were Russia, we would not be putting up with this for even 1 second. And America and NATO have always known this. The original agreement was that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east. And now, it's being suggested, even expected by our neocons, that NATO should invite Ukraine to join, placing our military and nuclear capabilities right at Russia's doorstep. It's also important in every war these days to remind us all that this foreign aid that we are sending to Ukraine, it's not going to Ukraine, at least not ultimately. What is actually happening is it is being sent to Ukraine, where first a huge portion is being skimmed off and laundered into the wallets of corrupt oligarchs over there, and then, as they are contractually obligated to do, they are turning around and spending that money on arms manufactured by the Western deep state. This money is going to the military-industrial complex that gets fat off supplying the world with endless wars, and they rely on these wars for their limitless wealth to keep expanding on and on ad infinitum. This has been the world order for 100 years. It has claimed millions, perhaps even billions of lives since World War I. And now, the bloodlust of the Western Empire has brought us once more to the brink of nuclear conflict. This is not a brave victory. It is a maniacal insanity verging on global suicide pact, and it needs to end. All I can say is that I pray that Trump can tighten his leash and get Ukraine under control in time to salvage some sort of peace, and that Putin will show some amount of restraint, even in the face of this kind of aggression. Something tells me that things are about to get much worse, though, before they get better. Because if you look at all the other stories we've been reporting on about the escalation around the world, and particularly here at home of the surveillance state that now verges on technocratic dystopia, there would be nothing more convenient to the deep state than global war. If you want to undermine Trump's second term, hollow out the populist uprising that put him in power twice, instate a digital surveillance program that will lock your citizens down for good, reset the global currency, and ensure another 100 years of world domination, well, a world war would be the clear answer to all of those problems. Listen, someone did 9/11. And even if we can't agree on who exactly that was, I think that any rational person at this point can admit that certain people in our intelligence agencies seem to have known about it in advance. It's just a shame that that information never made it to the right places in time to prevent it. These people, the people that profit off of endless war around the world, they were a part of that tragedy. Those are the lengths they will go to maintain power and enrich themselves. And I worry that we have something much worse in store for us any day now. And if something does happen, every American's first question should be, is this a false flag? Are we being led across a line from which there is no turning back? And where does this course lead? Because these roads always lead to war, to wealth consolidation in the hands of the rich, paid for by the blood of the poor. Up next, we're going to celebrate Pride Month, baby. But first, I want to talk to you about Tax Network USA. Tax day may have passed, but for millions of Americans, the real trouble is just beginning. If you missed the April 15th deadline or still owe back taxes, the IRS is ramping up enforcement. Every day you wait only makes things worse, with over 5,000 new tax liens filed daily, and tools like property seizures, bank levies, and wage garnishments, the IRS is applying pressure at levels we haven't seen in years. Increased administrative scrutiny means collections are moving fast. The good news? There's still time for Tax Network USA to help. Self-employed or a business owner? Even if your books are a mess, they've got it covered. Tax Network USA specializes in cleaning up financial chaos and getting you back on track fast. Even after the deadline, it's not too late to regain control. Your consultation is completely free, and acting now could stop penalties, threatening letters, and surprise levies before they escalate. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Candace. You may have missed April 15th, but you haven't run out of options. Let Tax Network USA help before the IRS makes the next move. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Candace. All right, guys, for our last story of the day, in lighter news, it's Pride Month, everybody. The month where we all get together in the streets in fetish and drag outfits and celebrate sex, specifically gay sex. And I find that often, to get a little perspective on things, it's helpful to reverse the roles and ask yourself if there's anything strange about what you're being told. So here's a video to give us all a little laugh and a bit of perspective on Pride Month.
I'm hetero. As a heterosexual, this is the month that everyone should recognize and celebrate my sexuality, which has always been a fantasy of mine. It's kind of hot. What do I take the most pride in? My values, my accomplishments, my morals, how I treat people. No, I take the most pride in where I stick my penis. Women. I think vaginas are terrific. Yes, I think corporations should do special hetero logos for this month. I mean, it's their job to make me feel sexually validated. And if they don't, I'll take my business elsewhere. Okay? As great as this month is, some people don't like to celebrate. They're like, oh, sexuality is something that should be expressed privately. Well, public displays of sexuality are a real turn on for me, and I need to use other people for that, with or without their consent, because it honors my bravery as a person. Yeah, I just live a few houses down. I have a penis between my legs. This is locked. Sexuality is the last thing that should be private. It's not that hard to celebrate Hetero Pride Month. All you have to do is ask yourself, how can I sexualize everything I do? It's appropriate.
I mean, maybe he's being a little exaggerated, but coming from a very liberal leftist town, if you don't know about how wild it gets, he's not far off. And listen, like I say, I was raised on the left, and personally, I'm of the belief that you should just do whatever makes you happy. As long as you're not hurting or violating anyone else, you're all good with me. But I'm also of the belief that the gay pride movement, which many have seen as just being about accepting gay people for who they are, has been hijacked by something completely different. There is a clear inorganic agenda tacked onto the end of your little acronym there. LGB turned into LGBT, and then into LGBTQ, and then it was LGBTQIA+. Lord knows what it means by now. There's a new flag every month, new banned words and new jargon that you have to use to show that you're inclusive and you're in the club. And really, it's a cult. And now, it's a cult that is pushing insane ideas on children, like that they can just chop off their genitals and take irreversible puberty blockers in order to fix just about any uncomfortable feeling that comes up during puberty. Well, everything took a pretty dark turn there pretty quick. But on a lighter note, I know a guy that's actually started Heterosexual Awesomeness Month up in Idaho. Meet Mark Fitzpatrick, founder of Old State Saloon. He owns this cozy little bar up in Eagle, Idaho, and last year he got to thinking, just like JP, why do we have these giant parades and festivals all over the country for people celebrating and fetishizing gay sex in public spaces, and not a single one celebrating traditional family values? So he started one. And oh boy, did the gays get mad. It went viral all over mainstream media as they decried him evil and hateful and racist and just about every other name you could come up with. And this year, he's doing it again. I'm going to actually try to fly up there later this month to attend and speak at their rally downtown Boise on June 21st, because although the whole idea can easily sound like a meme, we crossed a red line a long time ago, and it's way past time we took a stand. In multiple U.S. states now, teachers and counselors can legally facilitate children getting gender-affirming care behind their parents' backs without telling them. Gender-affirming care, which is not gender-affirming and is not care, is evil. It is lies. It is a social contagion, much like anorexia. And when you look at the data of referrals to gender care clinics, you can clearly see the pattern. Or you can look at data about the number of people identifying as transgender, like this graph sourced from the CDC, showing the same trend: social contagion. In other words, a disease that is actually a social phenomenon or idea that manifests as some sort of health outcome, like anorexia spreading throughout Hollywood and celebrities in the 2000s, and suddenly every tween girl is starving herself to try to look like Ashley Olsen. Anorexia was an idea. Transgenderism is an idea, but they spread like a contagion, and the consequences are very real. And this contagion is being perpetrated upon the masses through a complex media campaign with vast funding and subversive tactics. Suddenly, Megan Fox has 3 transgender kids. That's not real. That is child abuse. I was a teacher. My parents taught teachers for a living. The whole reason why we protect our children from things like drugs and porn and violence is because we know that the minds of children are extremely impressionable. Whatever you teach them is true becomes their truth. And this is the truth that the far-left liberal cult is teaching our kids at public schools and universities today. If you don't go along with it, you're a transphobe or a homophobe or some sort of other phobe. No, just stay the hell away from our children. If you're gay, that's all good. Gay people won their battle. They got the right to marry. No one cares at all if you're gay anymore. Just do you. But the moment that gay people got the W, extremists in their camp started pushing for more and more and more, and it's undermining the equality that gay people got in the first place. Love whoever you want to love. But if you want to chop your dick off and pretend to be the opposite sex, don't expect me to pretend with you. As long as you're of age to make such a drastic and, in my view, short-sighted life choice, whatever. I'm not going to stop you. I'm busy. But bro, let's be real. Let's, shall we say, follow the science. You either have XX or XY chromosomes. This dictates your hormonal reality, and it dictates your gender. It dictates everything about your brain, your body, your personality. Taking hormones in childhood is extremely dangerous, even if they're the right ones for your gender. Hence, why we don't encourage young boys to get all juiced up and try to look like Chris Bumstead halfway through puberty. And now, somehow, the left is just telling us it's no big deal to prescribe powerful hormonal cocktails to help turn you into the opposite gender? But you're a racist if you even suggest that maybe the rise in gender dysphoria among young people might just possibly have something to do with all the hormone-disrupting chemicals in our food and water and cosmetics. Don't you dare say something that could endanger our corporate profits, you bigot. So, you're racist if you suggest that hormonal imbalances might be causing the problem. But the solution to the problem is to take hormones. Or you could just chop your dick off. So anyways, I'll be flying up to Idaho later this month to celebrate with the homies. And I would invite all of you, also all you gay and lesbian people too, to come and party. Because ultimately, we all have a mom and a dad, even if he's still out at the store getting milk. Because at least for now, babies all come from wombs. And while we're still human, before Peter Thiel puts us all in little tanks of goop plugged into the Matrix, that's worth celebrating. That's our show for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like the video on your way out. Drop a comment about something that you loved. Be sure to subscribe to Candace's channel, and I really appreciate it if you follow the link in the description to go over to my channel, Ian Carroll Show, and subscribe over there. For now, take good care of yourself, drink some water, tell someone you love them tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow.